pioneering solutions, transformational technology, and inspirational leaders. I'm your host, Conor Sherman, and this is the Confident Defense Podcast. Welcome to the Confident Defense Podcast. I'm your host, Conor Sherman, and today our guest is Amy Looper, the founder of Relativity Consulting, and someone I've been really excited to have a long-form conversation with for a while now. Amy is the founder of a growth company that helps security product and service organizations build scalable sales and marketing capabilities. Her firm is focused as a force multiplier that's unlocking security innovation in our industry today. So Amy, welcome, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Conor. I really appreciate the invitation.
Now, I've been really looking forward to this, as I mentioned, because as we have these conversations with these innovative entrepreneurs who are like coming out and they're solving discrete problems in security, I'm like, great, that's amazing. What's your go-to-market strategy? And like, it's crickets, right? And I say like, wait, you have this incredible technology. You want to solve these important problems. But I feel that like startups are failing because of a lack of sales, not a lack of skills. And I don't know how you can resonate with that, but that's just the number one thing I'm seeing is that like it's the money in the door is what makes these companies scale and bring these scalable, innovative solutions. Not do we have a better quality engineer on day one?
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree with you more. And that's where we fill a lot of gaps, right? It's these companies are, there's so many that have come to market and there's so much talent, engineering talent that, is just really phenomenal to see. But when you look at, connecting with buyers, when there are so many companies in the marketplace and so much competition, it's really hard for the buyer to, listen to so many vendor pitches and understand really what your product or your service is doing differently than the person that came in 10 minutes before you, right? Yeah. So it really takes a focused approach to honing in your brand message, really having that passion and internal understanding when you're delivering that message so that you can make that meaningful connection with prospective buyers.
Yeah, totally. And there's also this thing I see is like, when I'm talking with these startups of 10, 15 people, and they're like, hey, we're going to conquer the world in this way. What they're like, oh, don't worry about marketing. We'll automate it, right? We're a bunch of engineers. We're just going to script up HubSpot and put in some workflows. And somehow that's going to solve the effective messaging and the relationship building. But something you told me was that the average CISO, like the decision maker in a security program, receives something like 200 inbound calls or sales from vendors a day. Like, that's just got to be an overwhelming amount. Well, I know I've been on the receiving end of that. What I do is I invest in better spam technology and just block off those vendors that are noisy to get some real work done.
Right. Exactly. And that's the problem, and I've heard that from actual CISOs that were my clients, right? I would ask them, ones that you've really developed those meaningful relationships with, and just, ask them like, gosh, we want to be helpful to you. We want to present the best information. We don't want to come in and do, the dog and pony, manufacture demos all the time, or like, these quarterly business reviews, which are scripted. We want to make sure that these meetings are productive for your team because, being in security, time is very limited. You're oftentimes wearing multiple hats. You might be, investigating an incident while you're trying to also hold the day-to-day meetings. And it can be, your time is just very stretched. And so while I think the security community on the vendor side, sometimes vendors are kind of reluctant to, put some of these meetings out there and really put some of this data in front of their customers because they know that this is a problem. But at the same time, they kind of flounder in the space of marketecture. It's like, well, we're just going to keep doing the same old campaigns. So it creates this cycle of events where like the vendors want to connect with the consumer, but the consumer is just so overwhelmed. And so they get this bad reputation of, oh, it's another vendor. And so the vendors have this really difficult time of becoming thought leaders because of this issue. So the way that we try to solve that, with my team is really focusing on the activities and creating meaningful content that your prospective buyers want to see, and it may be different from client to client. So really working at it from a strategic account marketing perspective can be really effective. What works with one, industry and client might not work completely for another.
That's a really interesting point, and I know that being on kind of both sides of the table, what I've found more helpful is focusing on something that you've talked about on LinkedIn a few times here, is education versus selling. Like technically it's part of a longer sales cycle, but it really is, how do you help someone understand the problem space over time? And then you build a relationship as someone who's trusted to solve that problem. So like, I'm really excited to unpack like how startups can build the sales and marketing and scale their products and services. But first, I really want to just hear a little bit more about you, where you started, how you came. I mean, the fact you started in healthcare and doing, you're an electronics vendor in the healthcare space, and you've moved from that to a VAR to an MSSP to now really building a growth engine for startups. I mean, that's kind of a hell of a journey to go through. So, I mean, if you would mind just like rewind the clock a little bit and just let us know how you got here.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks for asking the question. I love hearing how people get into different things because everyone has a story to tell. And mine started really, majoring in public communication, really liking the PR and crisis communication aspect of it. So 2020, looking back, hindsight's always 2020, in that look at cybersecurity. It's all about crisis communication. It's all about trying to manage people, process, and technology, right? And that's exactly what I've kind of done my whole career in different ways, shapes, and form. Starting with, starting with data security within healthcare. I was working with large hospitals, large IDNs, large medical ambulatory groups. And when you're selling electronic medical records, and this was during the Obama period of Affordable Care Act, it really was getting a physician to shift from a traditional paper documentation method to an electronic method, right? So dealing with that people and process and technology kind of problem. And the reason why I bring that up is because working alongside all of these providers, each one was uniquely different. Each specialty had different requirements, and you really had to really kind of become like this project manager of sorts during the sales process to effectively, get them to change to your specific recommended solution, but also help guide them through all of the regulatory requirements that were current at that time. And this was the time not only of just electronic medical records, but it was the time of the states coming together with health information exchanges and really creating this huge infrastructure across the country of transferring patient data and very sensitive healthcare data. And what I saw during that time was, security was not a priority. It was all about physician, efficiency and physicians' wants and needs. And it was really alarming kind of at that point to see that, because, the Affordable Care Act was all about trying to make data sharing easier and working towards patient outcomes and improving the overall healthcare industry from that perspective. But it was a very big uplift for all of us vendors in the whole industry to kind of shift this, providers getting off of electronic records or getting off of paper and moving to electronic records. So that's where that started. And as my career developed, our own personal family life developed as well at that same time. So I ended up transitioning to get off of the road. I was managing a team over a 6-state region, and really transitioned into the IT industry during that time, working for a local value-added reseller in Phoenix. And that's when I got introduced to cybersecurity services. We were reselling virtual CISO services at that time. And, this particular individual that we were working with was part of the Ponymon Institute. And through that period, got introduced to just the wonderful world of cybersecurity that we know today. Got introduced to Kim Green, who owns her own, she owned her own consultancy at the time and was a mentor, and took me through a 9-month program to really figure out, as a woman in kind of a career transition, Do I want to stay in sales and marketing? Do I want to contribute to the cybersecurity field in perhaps a different way, maybe looking at filling like an analyst role or something like that? So I actually went through a big mentorship with her that took me through the 8 domains of cybersecurity, studied a lot of the CISSP material. After that, I definitely, confirmed the fact that sales and marketing is my path. And that's really where the passion is. You really can't focus, you can't like just jump from something that you've been doing for so long and it just comes natural. So I knew that that was the way that I could contribute to the industry while also making sure that we were promoting and helping to build meaningful relationships, through sales and marketing efforts.
Totally. I mean, just that alone, just building relationships. I think a lot of people who are bringing services and products to the market just forget that, like, at the end of the day, there's somebody else, a human on the other side of that phone call.
Yes.
There's a human on the other side of that inbox, and you want to connect with the human, not the spam filter.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. And so, yeah, mad respect for trying to, we're not trying, but like going actively down the road of like studying for the CISSP at the same time you're going through this massive family transition. At the same time, you're trying to figure out what your next steps in your career are. I mean, that is, a lot of people in the security industry like to give, security's, certifications are just a piece of paper. I'm like, yeah, well, it's a lot of hours of studying to get that little piece of paper. I mean,
definitely.
Having gone through it myself, it was just like, yeah, it's not an end all be all, but it is a hell of a stepping stone to move forward. And it's a lot of work. So good job.
Yeah, definitely. Mad respect for all of you out there that have, gotten the CISSP, especially now with the new way that they take the test, the adaptive testing. It's fun.
It just gets harder and harder over time. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so you went through this whole thing of like connecting with people and helping them with their really doing the sales and marketing for like the MS, moving to like selling MSSP services and security services. You were, part of you had joined a tech company, Darling, is in the security space and really helped them in the regional area. And then you moved into building your own growth company. And I mean, I just think that trajectory, right? You've kind of seen, from my perspective in the conversations we've had, you've gone from crisis management to data protection to 24/7 security services. You've pretty much hit the portfolio of what a CISO is often dealing with when they're going through it. So it makes a lot of sense that you know how to understand the market space, what the real problems are, get past the buzzwords and just say, okay, actually you're weak here, you're strong here. Maybe this person helps you there.
Yeah, exactly. I think it helps to just, when you're a vendor, really making sure you take the time to listen to your clients and really put yourselves in their shoes. I think so many times we feel the pressure, especially if you're in a sales organization or if you're a leader of a company, you've got so much pressure to perform, right? You've got to keep revenue going. And sometimes that can get in the way of our listening skills. And it just goes back to asking the right questions of your customers and making sure when you are in front of, a CISO or any kind of security leader, their time is so limited. So being able to make sure that, you're connecting the right dots with them and whatever you're offering them is, you take the time to just have that one-on-one conversation, I think is so helpful.
So, and as being on someone who's been on the receiving side of that, like that's truly appreciated, the human element of that. So what inspired you to move into building a growth company on sales and marketing? Like you mentioned a little bit earlier, like it is your core skills that you've been doing this for such a long period of time, but was there anything more behind that driver? I mean, it is a deviation from selling somebody else's solutions to coming and saying, let me go partner with different companies and different organizations to help build build the sales, build the marketing for these companies. So what was the driver for starting your own growth company?
Yeah, the passion really comes from, I've been a sales manager before and worked through different models, right? There's always, you work for other people, there's always different models of selling frameworks and different things. So I've learned a lot over that time, and I felt like it was a perfect time and to be able to get back to the community in the fact of, being able to provide customized solutions for each client, because not everyone can fit into one mold. Your company is at a different stage than the next one down the road. And so you need to be able to have a structure of sales and marketing that's really built to accommodate whatever stage of company that you're in. So I felt like it was a perfect opportunity to kind of marry all the experiences that we've had from a sales management perspective, from a sales enablement perspective, as well as marketing. A lot of people kind of treat these things in silos, and I've seen big companies do this too, where like, the global security organization that I worked for previously, sometimes you get so big that you have a lot of silos. And then if the right hand, like to say sales isn't talking to marketing or vice versa, then you're both working on different campaigns and you're not ever coming together to create collective results. And there's always power in numbers, right? So if you can collectively weave in marketing activities to support sales and create sales enablement to just, level up your sales team, you're going to be that much more effective in a faster time period. And that's what we offer here at Relativity, is a combination of those things to give you a really powerful base structure for you to develop. And you might start with just a couple of reps. You might just start with your internal team. It depends on, what stage of company you're in. But nonetheless, it's a need that needs to be built at the very beginning.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point about this whole like this silos thing. And, it's definitely an unfortunate byproduct of when you start to scale. If you scale with this idea that these are all discrete problems and you all need to be solved in a discrete way, versus scaling with the idea of a journey in mind, that the customer is going to show up, like never hear of you. Great. Now they've heard, a little bit of marketing. Okay. Now we've seen you on LinkedIn. Now we've built this presence. We've built this awareness. And over time, there's this kind of build up. Okay. Now the sales team is stepping in to really build that relationship over time. Like, so yeah, that whole idea of like a journey versus a transaction that we're talking about, and building startups that value the journey versus just trying to get that transaction.
Definitely. Yeah. And that's where we really prefer to partner, are those that want to take the journey, that are willing to spend the time and really dig in, because it's a big, undertaking when you're trying to deliver, when you're trying to create your own company, right? You've got enough on your plate, and then to really have to kind of, put your blinders on for a couple of moments throughout the day to really identify, wait a minute, what's our brand? Are we heading in the right direction? Are we staying true to what we've identified as our direction? I think that can be difficult for entrepreneurs as well.
Yes, finding a North Star and sticking to it.
Yes, exactly. And we all do it, right? I do that in my own sales business over many territories. I've caught myself like, wait a minute, going off course, got to detour back, and just making sure that every little step you make through each day, you're making progress to the overall goal and not getting off track.
So let's unpack that for a second, because I mean, there's a lot inside that phrase. One of the things I think really people struggle with is in the security space, right? What we do is a little weird and wonky. I was having a conversation with someone earlier today, and they said, if you think about it, like being in cybersecurity is one of the few industries where we have an active adversary, right? So unless you're in the military or something like that, it's one of the only civilian jobs where someone's like coming after you. And coming after your organization you're defending. So this is the idea, like, so what we do is different than other functions inside a traditional business. And the other thing is that also that we're kind of like mental athletes, like you might see with grand chess masters and stuff like that. Well, even they have downtime, even they unplug. But when I talk to people in the security space, I'm like, when was the last time you took vacation and didn't check Slack? You didn't check your email. Like, we don't unplug, we don't stop. So you have this idea, like we're doing something different. We're running really hard and trying to solve problems that the organization may not connect with. Like we know they need to solve it, but we may not be communicating with the rest of the organization the right way. So can you help us unpack, just like, this might be from the perspective of a CEO of a security startup who's trying to sell inbound to an organization, help communicate and build that executive message, but also internally when you have security leaders and they're trying to understand how to unpack the challenges that they're facing in a way that relates to the rest of the business. That executive communication, what are some of your thoughts around that and how we could just, as an industry, get better at that?
Yeah, I think, having those regular internal, meetings are so important. To your point, you're as a security team, you're involved in so much activity, and you're not taking time off. People are burned out. There can be a lot of turnover. And so keeping everybody on the same page, I think, is important, whether that be, kind of a weekly meeting on just, hey, this is where, the overall organization goals are. This is how we're trending, and kind of having a like a green, yellow, red kind of, meeting where you're saying, hey, this is where we need to focus on this next couple of weeks, can be helpful. It also is helpful just to have some, group meetings where, you might bring lunch in or something and just have an open discussion, right? Have collaboration where you ask your own employees, what are they seeing? What are they experiencing? And not always just driving the tasks from the top down, but making sure you have a collaborative buy-in from everybody and gathering their internal opinions about things. And we often do this when helping people go to market, right? I always, tell my clients, in fact, I'm working on an engagement this next week around, market research, spending the time to really understand the market and gathering a lot of information and bringing that all together is so important. And I think it's part of that is gathering the internal information as well from your own team.
Yeah, that's really, that's makes a lot of sense to kind of go through that market research, because you have to know like who you're selling to, why, what the value props are and all that. But I think when you can correct me if I go wrong, I usually be crazy here, but as you're doing that research, I could see one of the, maybe the organic benefits of that being is that when you understand your problem space really well, you build confidence and you build a rapport really quickly. But B, when you've done the legwork and then you're able to then turn those facts into education.
Yeah.
So when we talk about like, if you're bringing a product to market and you're dealing with like credentials in code, okay, how big is this problem space? How much is this? How big is this issue? Oh, you're offering or you might be, hey, we do 24/7 service on cloud security. It's like, great. Like what does the problem space actually look like? And when you as a solutions provider know the problem space so well that you can educate your customer, I can imagine that's just like incredibly helpful data and facts to just kind of just drive that whole sales process.
Yes, definitely. I think that's where you become the trusted advisor and you really start to turn your own business, right? From just maybe surviving off of referrals of personal relationships to really driving new business and breaking into new markets for sure.
That's a really good point. Yeah. The amount of startups who are like, they get as far as their social network will take them, and then they kind of run out of steam because they solved a good product, but their rapport was based on the personal relationship. The rapport wasn't based on like the solution that the product was bringing to market. So getting past that invisible barrier, and I can only imagine so many startups just hit this and like just don't know why they can't move faster. Why is it that all of a sudden it's petering off and it's like, let's work harder, but it's like, well, actually you're hitting like a wall and you just don't know it. And the problem is you've run out of, jet fuel. You've run out of a network to work through and go for it. So if someone was to kind of, I guess this moves into like long-term relationship building from a positioning perspective, but what should startup leaders be doing to improve that positioning in their solutions they're bringing to market, and then also developing those long-term relationships?
Yeah, I think so. One thing that I've noticed is consistent within, that startup space, and it really is simple. It's not, rocket science, but it just takes some focus to go in and plan your business. Being a proactive business versus reactive is so important. And especially as we see, in 2020, we've seen obviously having businesses having to pivot very quickly. Even the VC space has, just really been shifting a lot this year too, where, last year they were funding, well over 10 billion of investments. And this year they kind of took a minute to reevaluate, but they're still, funding over 21,000 startups according to strategic cyber ventured sources. So, it's still a focus of growth. And I think in order to grow, you have got to plan 6 to 12 months in advance. So that may seem a little unrealistic for some startups because they just operate in this month-to-month kind of culture. But if you can kind of shift out of this, I'm going to just deliver for all of my, referral sources and keep trying to pray that the referral sources keep coming in, and shifting to, okay, now we're going to start really understanding doing market research, first of all, understanding where the market's going as much as we possibly can. And partnering with people that can help us do that. And then keeping, understanding how that buyer persona may be transforming post-COVID, and planning the marketing and sales activities months in advance, so that not only can you be ready for them, but you can budget appropriately, and you can mirror your sales and marketing program to your budget, so that you're not overstepping your skis, but you're having this fine balance where you're shifting to a more proactive model. And that will help you build the reoccurring revenue much easier. It'll help you forecast in a much tighter way than some startups are currently doing.
Yeah. And do you say there were 21,000 startups that were funded from that?
Yes. Yeah. And the average, I think, per fund was like 6.1 million.
That's a lot of money still being poured into a space. And so I guess if anyone thinks that, like, oh, all of a sudden security is no longer a problem that needs to be solved for, I guess that's not true anymore, which we all knew.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll reference that in the show notes, because I think it's just such an powerful thing. It's like, even when life is hard, even when the markets are struggling, even when people are unsure, we know that these problem sets still need to be solved for. We need to make forward progress. And I guess to your point, like, the difference between the startup that makes it and the startup that doesn't make it are the ones who have a 6 to 12 month forecast. It's like, this is where we're going. Yeah, we're going to be agile, but we're going to be agile with a purpose. We're going to be agile with a mission.
Yes.
Yeah, because I see a lot of organizations, they're like, oh no, agile, we take user feedback. I'm like, users don't usually know what they want. Like, it's like your job as a product solution provider to, like, help us as consumers understand the problem that we're dealing with, provide the solution, and then we'll give you feedback on which button works and which one doesn't. But, like, don't rely entirely on your referral network to tell you where your roadmap is or where you should be moving strategically. That sounds like a disaster.
Yeah, exactly. And, and the great thing about being in the startup world is, so many people have come from, large companies. They have extensive backgrounds. They've specialized in something along the way, which enables them now to kind of focus on the startup. And so bringing that knowledge and experience and then marrying that together with, whatever you're bringing to market is so important, because you can, if you really know your market, if you know the industry, if if you can kind of forecast the outlook, you're going to be able to get ahead of the competition. Like, for an example, I always think of EDR vendors. How many EDR vendors are out there? I feel like anytime you turn a corner, there's a new one claiming to do some magical, voodoo on your network and automatically take care of the issues. We all know that's not true. We all know there's work that goes into it. And so being able to stay ahead of that, because your customers are using the products. They've tested probably many over the last 12 months. And so when you approach them with a product demo or a product pitch, they're already going, okay, this is a line from, sales or whatever, they're anticipating the ability and opportunity to really kind of beat you up on what you're bringing to market. And so you need to be ready for that. And if you're not, then that's where, you need some leveling up to do.
Yeah, that whole beating up vendors is an unfortunate trend in the security. Like, I've seen, like, CISOs, like, in the good old boys club, and they're, like, bragging about how they are so hard on their vendors. I'm just like, hold on, there are humans on the other side of this too. Like, can we not just take it easy?
Yes, I will mention, like, for those of us on the other side, a lot, sales sometimes gets this, like, 4-letter word, connotation, right? And it's really unfortunate, because if people, have been in a sales role, or maybe that's their passion, is to really, help, like myself. I really just like to help people, and I like to bring the right solution and help people bridge, those relationships. So there are really helpful people if you just let them do their job.
Yeah. Now, I've seen my brother. So my brother's in sales, different market, but it's incredible to see someone who's good at their craft, because you're just like, and if they're good at the craft and you can trust them, it's amazing because of how, as security practitioners, we think a kind of a certain way. We like to think that we can think in any particular model, but the amount of creativity and ingenuity and stuff that comes from having someone who's trusted on the sales side, my brother can just find solutions out of nowhere. It's like, oh, he's like, he loves people. He's great and got a wonderful social network. He got all this trusted relationship. So when I have a problem, he's like, oh, you should talk to so-and-so and let me position you in this way. And then we're going to come through and there's the introduction. And it's like this magic just happened because someone on the sales side that's just who he was. That's just who he is organically, it's who he is naturally. So I think we do ourselves a significant disservice as security leaders when we start to beat up on the vendors so that we can brag on LinkedIn that, we made someone else's day miserable.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that, Conor.
I'll give you guys a little love on this side. Yes. But I mean, it's a really good point of just building out that long-term relationship. And I think it keeps coming back to that. So, right, it's how do we have that strategy? If you're bringing a product to market, having that strategy, that North Star that you're going to go for 6 to 12 months, you've got your positioning in the market, which can we unpack just positioning for a little bit? I think it's just such a powerful concept that gets overlooked. I see a lot of people trying to solve it with hey, we bring this widget that's better than that widget. And that doesn't bring credibility. That just sounds like a cat fight, right? It just sounds like you got two cats in the alleys going after it. It's so let's talk about positioning for a little bit and how startup leaders should be thinking about, hey, I've got this team of 15, we solved this discrete problem, but how do we position ourselves in the market to be trusted? How do we position ourselves to be the go-to, even if we don't have maybe the clout of some larger enterprise solution?
Yeah, definitely. There's a number of different ways. So, starting with, and what I call market research can be anything from, surveying your customers to partners. I think it's also really important to align with partners as well, especially within the cyber community. And also secret shopping folks, putting your marketing team or a marketing consultant on some, hunts where they can go and really understand the messaging that's being put out there, because there is a lot of FUD, right? There is just a lot of noise within the industry. So just being aware of that, I think is something of importance, but then also bringing that back home and then creating your SWOT analysis, there's a tool called the Porter's 5 Forces analysis that is often used in market research. And what it does is it measures your competition, how intense it is, the attractiveness and profitability of some of these companies. So you can pick your top 2 to 3 so that you really kind of understand where you need to focus as differentiators. And then it comes down to, and I think it's important to do this as a leadership team. Some organizations prefer to do it maybe as an owner and a partner. But I think it's important to have this culture where you all kind of identify the brand and the identity that you're going towards, so that you have a targeted buyer persona that everybody is enthusiastic about. Because the worst thing you can do is say, okay, that's our target because maybe that's where the money is taking you, but there's no passion behind it, right? Or not everyone is on the same bus going towards the same goal. So it's kind of some of that organizational management as well.
Got it. Yeah. That identity discovery is, I think that's really powerful. And if I understand it correctly, what you're saying is kind of forecast an imaginary buyer who might be someone that you would sell to, understand what they, kind of what are the demographics, or where are they in an organization, what type are they, the decision makers, are they the influencers? Right. Is that what you're talking about, kind of breaking out that persona, that avatar?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, identifying the persona. How are you gonna message things to them before you even know these people? How might you, after you get to know these people and get an introduction, how might you address them in a sales cycle, right? And then building the sales enablement to be able to train your sales folks and representatives to talk to these people in the right way, because you can't just throw a sales force out there and say, go sell my stuff, right? Look at my website and go sell. That's usually pretty ineffective. Yes. And we've all been in those situations where we've kind of been thrown out to the wolves. But But, you ideally want to, hire people in your sales organization, for an example, that are very, capable, bring very good relationships, but then empower them, right? Empower them with the latest market data, gather data from your salespeople. They are out in the trenches. So, make sure that their feedback is also being incorporated, because your buyer personas will transform. It's not that you build them once, you're going to update them probably, throughout the year. Maybe it's just twice a year, maybe you just do it biannually. If your market's changing dramatically because of whatever is happening in the world, or within the consolidation of cybersecurity solutions, you might need to do it more. But, just briefly touching on, the messaging, I think is so important.
Yes. So you said something there I want to unpack a little bit, like that consolidation of the cybersecurity market. It's so interesting because like we have this sense of like we are both a collapsing star and an exploding one at the same time.
Yes.
And there are parts of the world that are like collapsing. I think we see that a lot as we see like these software vendors that are becoming behemoths in their space, and then they're just kind of like gobbling up consulting firms and like, hey, we have professional services arm now, or
Yes.
things you like, instant response software companies are now offering instant response services.
Mm-hmm.
If you put yourself in the shoes of some of these startups that you're working with, like what should, like, is that a scary thing? Is it a good thing? Is it an exciting thing? Is it, hey, it doesn't matter, let's just sell thing? Like, what do you think like that is? Yeah. Well, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's an exciting time. I've always, dating back to the electronic medical record era, I had some of my best sales years during the years of consolidation. So I think it can be a really good thing on the sales side, but it kind of depends on where you're at. What I'm hearing from our customers today, and I'm working with folks in cybersecurity. I'm also working with folks in, doing like audio visual automation. So both spaces that are very service oriented. What I'm seeing from both is they are really, they understand there's heavy competition. They are not really super threatened by it. They're a little concerned but more, I think, motivated to target and laser focus their business on what they can perform well at. And maybe that's like one or two services versus trying to go after everything in the market space that some of the big guys can do, right? The Palo Altos of the world, the CrowdStrikes of the world, they're trying to be a one size fits all, like, hey, you already have us, in your network, in your endpoint, and you're automating all these things. Why not just rely on us for IR services, right? With their latest acquisition. It makes sense. As a big company, I understand why they're doing that. As a smaller player, you do have to be very specialized. And I think that that's the value, right? People will want to come to you because you have a very niche focus, or at least expertise in a very specialized area. And that would be your value to the market.
Got it. Okay. That makes complete sense, right? If you're going to do something and you're smaller, be excellent at that one thing versus trying to be, if you're a startup, don't compete with a multi-billion-dollar international organization who's trying to do everything, because then you'll just look like a watered down copycat. But like really focus, like what's the one problem I'm solving in the market, become excellent at that. And then maybe because you've done everything so well, you're ripe for acquisition, or then you're ripe for, maybe expanding that portfolio.
Most definitely.
That's great. So there's a lot of things to unpack here, and we could talk forever about this. But part of this is also, and it's an educational experience, right? So getting from what you and I've discussed, it's like you got to get the CEO and the C-suite like ready to build and kind of take this idea that sales and marketing is not an afterthought. This positioning where they are in their brand, understanding their market, and being able to incorporate that into their culture, into something that's happening. So as far as like that training, that kind of going and really embedding this either through workshops and stuff, do you have anything coming up that we should be talking about that the listeners of this podcast might benefit from attending or jumping on in the coming weeks or months?
Yeah, I definitely do. So we've been really busy, really coming up with some good virtual classes. I think, everyone's tired of Zoom meetings and everything else, but but also finding that, taking virtual classes is a really efficient way of just, leveling up on different areas. A lot of folks have asked me, how can we, virtually sell? How can we leverage tools like LinkedIn, for an example, when we're going to, market in a B2B situation? How can we make more meaningful connections? So we're kicking off a virtual series in October. We're going to run this through the end of the year. So the last quarter, October through December, and it will be around virtual classes around sales enablement. So you might be an executive that maybe it's been a while since you've been in sales. Maybe you started in sales a really long time ago, and you've moved through operational roles and whatnot. And you just want to kind of get back into, okay, now that the world is virtually selling more than shaking hands over dinner because it's just a changed environment this year, how can we leverage some of these tools and kind of just revamp our sales approaches? That's one track. And then, talking about how can we actually leverage content marketing for our business without this huge uplift of, trying to create consistent content, because that can definitely be a drag on an organization. I think we've all experienced that. So how can we, kind of do that in an efficient way? That'll be another track. And looking forward to connecting with people in this way, because as we do these group events, it will be a group environment, so that there'll be open Q&A and discussion and opportunity to network with other business owners as well.
That's really cool. And go back to content marketing for a second. So I just want to circle back on that. That is such an important thing today. Like, and I'm not like some influencer person, but like, I know that the ability to say something intelligently to the right audience at the right time is really important. There was this quote that's attributed to a guy called Taki Moore, and he says, instead of shouting louder, we need to whisper the right words into the right ears at the right time. Yes. And I think I really resonated with kind of this flow of this conversation with, like, as a startup, like, who are you? Where are you in the world? How do you solve and help people succeed with their mission? And then integrating that into the culture. Like, that just sounds so perfect.
Yeah, definitely easier said than done, right? I mean, the anxiety of business and just the energy it takes to drive business, I get, it can be very anxious at points, but when as a business owner, when you have that emotional intelligence to just be able to kind of like take a breath and just take baby steps throughout the day to make progress and just, keep your eye on the prize, I think is so important. So, I love that approach too, Conor. It just, that's the way to win it.
So I'm going to move into the final part of the show here, which is something you did not know about. And so I'm going to give you a couple of questions that you did not know. I just a rapid fire question. And if I can ask you for behalf of the audience who's listening to this, again, the person is like, we're a leader in a startup in the security space. What is the one thing, and there can be more, but like, what's the one thing you really think people should be doing on LinkedIn that they are not doing today to get more value out of LinkedIn? And that even sounds way too posh. Like, what are people being terrible at LinkedIn and you'd love to see them fix and do better at when they're going through this process?
So twofold. First of all, the personalized messaging is not personalized, and it drives me bonkers. As a business owner myself, of course, I get inundated all day long with people telling me that they can increase sales and generate leads and do marketing and the same thing that I'm sure my own customers get throughout the day. And the fact is LinkedIn should not be used to just blanket prospect, right? To just send out these generic messages and spam people. We really, I think less is more. If you make 5 meaningful connections with, 5, do research on your folks that you want to connect with. It might be a prospect. It might just be a business partner that you want to connect with, right? But if you know something about them, if you really do your research and homework and have a genuine message, I think that goes so much farther than, just sending blanketed cold emails.
Perfect. Yes, I'm all about that. LinkedIn for relationships and like not transactions.
Yes.
That's great. Well, Amy, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your insights. We covered a lot of ground today. Where is the best place for people who want to connect with you to continue the conversation?
Yeah, I'm always on LinkedIn, so that is great. And then also at our website, which is relativityconsultingllc.com. And always happy to, connect, and they can schedule time with us directly on the website.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to add those contacts to the show notes when we go to publish the podcast.
Excellent. Thank you, Connor.
Okay. Well, Amy, thank you so much for your time today.
All right. Take care.
Bye.